What is going on, guys? Jeff here, Mad Hatter's Reef. Today we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 saltwater fish that are ideal replacement candidates for a established reef tank. Now, a situation that this might happen in, let's say you got a reef tank that's been set up for an extended period of time and you had to move a fish on because it outgrew the tank, or you had a loss in the tank and you're looking to add another fish. This list of fish is going to give you an idea of some of the candidates that would be a good fit for an established reef tank where all the fish that have been in there for an extended period of time know each other, and you want to have a fish that is going to do its best and also thrive in a situation such as that. So today we're taking a look at the top 10 replacement saltwater fish for an established reef tank. But before we jump into that, if this is your first time being here, this is where I talk about everything reef tank related. So if you love the reefs like I do, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell so you can be notified every single time that I upload a new video. Also, something I'm super excited about, I had my first pair of clownfish breed in store this week. So I am hoping to be able to put a clownfish breeding series together for you guys, which has always been a long-term goal of the channel. I got the opportunity actually to film the whole egg-laying process, which was really cool, and I'm very excited about this. So if you guys are interested in checking out a clownfish breeding series, make sure you hit that like button so I know that you want to see that happen. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into the top 10 replacement saltwater fish for an established reef tank. And kicking things off with number 10, it's even a surprise to me, I like the flame hawkfish for a fish that is going into an established reef tank. Now, there's a lot to be said about that, a lot to unpack. The hawkfish in general, not always a great candidate for a reef tank, although folks absolutely adore this fish. They are a relatively interesting fish as far as their behavior goes, but in the grand scheme of things, they can be rather aggressive to their tank mates. Now, with that being said, in a situation where you have an established reef, fish that have been together for an extended period of time, I'm talking 1 to 2 years, the fish that would be coming in behind that established pecking order is going to be at a disadvantage. When you add a new fish to the tank, they generally will accept everybody that is in the tank before them. Anything that comes after them usually is at that disadvantage, and they will kind of just like, all right, I'm going to find a place where I can fit in. So in a situation where you are, in the beginning and you're creating your fish wish list and you're trying to, figure that whole thing out, I wouldn't recommend this fish. But if you have a tank that's been up for an extended period of time and you got, like the semi-aggressive fish already in there, some tangs and whatnot, this would be a good fish to kind of get in there. I have a service account where he has a brute of a coral beauty, and we wanted to get another fish in there, something that was red, and it turned out that we needed a fish that was going to be able to handle the aggression of the coral beauty, and the flame hawkfish was a perfect fit. If you're in a situation where you are trying to put your wish list together and create a stocking plan from that, I would pass on the flame hawkfish and go with a long-nosed hawkfish. They're a little bit better of a citizen, but in a situation where you got that established reef, you're trying to get a fish in there, I would check out the flame hawkfish. Coming in at number 9 on our top 10 fish that are ideal for an established reef tank, I would take a look at the Lyretail anthias. The reason that I would go with the Lyretails is because aggression, even though that they are not very high on that scale, it is part of their DNA in the way in which that they need to figure out who's the male and who's the female. They're the inverse of clownfish, so clownfish are all born male. Lyretail anthias are all born female. The most aggressive one will become the male. And in a situation where you are looking to stock a reef tank, I would do one of two things. I'd either add one, because you're guaranteed to get a male that way, or I would add 3 to 4, because that male is going to want a group of females to control. So when it comes to Lyretail anthias, it's either 1 or 4 or more. That's going to give you a good recipe for success with them. Now, the reason that I like these guys for an established reef tank is because you're adding a group of them in most cases. So any aggression that might happen from other species is going to be spread out over the group. Absolute beautiful fish, great fish, good personality, beautiful colors. Check them out, the Lyretail anthias. Coming in at number 8 on our top 10 saltwater fish for an established reef tank, we got the Aptasia eating filefish. So many folks end up buying this fish just because they need the help with the Aptasias. I actually just recently had put one of these guys to work in a nano tank that we had here at the store, and they're great workers. Now, some may ask, why would you put this guy in a established reef tank? Because they are super docile and skittish. The reason that I included this fish on this top 10 is because they are super under the radar. When you put them into a tank, most fish just generally ignore them. And I don't know if it's because they got them little spikes on them. Side note, you don't want to be using a net when you're handling a filefish. It will not go well. But they tend to just fall under the radar. Fish don't really pay attention to them, and they just kind of slowly float around and do their thing. And that's why, with also the bonus of in a situation where you may have Aptasia in your tank, they're great workers, and that's why they're on this top 10. Coming in at number 7, we have the blonde naso. Now, the blonde naso is one of the bigger tangs that are out there, and they are not necessarily, with tangs, semi-aggressive, right? You can pretty much just say that across the board. There's something different about the blonde naso, or the nasos in general. They are not as aggressive, but they are rather bold. And there are fish that are not really going to take a whole lot of anything from anybody, and they just kind of float around like little submarines and do their thing. With that being said, this isn't just a fish that I would, like the hawkfish where I said, this isn't really a fish that you want to have with your core. This is a fish I would absolutely have with the core. The big thing with nasos is they do get rather large, and you do need a rather good sized tank. I would have at a minimum, 180 bigger, preferably, because these fish get so big. And they are relatively interesting. And the blonde naso, in my opinion, is one of the most beautiful saltwater fish out there for sure. And they're going to work well when you're starting out and doing your original core, your wish list, turning into a stock plan. And they're also a fish that, let's say down the road and you need a replacement tang for whatever situation that may have came up, they're also going to do well in that situation as well. Generally, you're not going to find these guys relatively small. They're usually at a minimum going to be like that 3 to 4 inch range. And even once in a while you can see them or find them rather big with streamers and that whole deal. Beautiful fish. Check them out, the blonde naso. Coming in at number 6, one of my personal favorites, the Starry blenny. Now, the Starry blenny, much like the filefish, can kind of just fall into a tank and really just go under the radar. They're also relatively bold, and sometimes can be a little on the aggressive side, especially if you're putting other fish in there that kind of eat the same types of food as they do. Another consideration also would be same colorations. So if you are looking at this fish for your core, original wish list stocking plan type scenario, I'd probably put them in towards the middle. Maybe when you get past like your smaller, more peaceful fish, kind of right smack dab in the middle, get this guy in there. They are a ideal herbivore for smaller systems as well. They are going to do well in, I would say, 30 to 40 gallon and bigger. This blenny can get relatively big. I've had some absolute monsters come into the store, which is rather interesting. Absolute beautiful fish. Also great personality. Check them out, the Starry blenny. Coming in at number 5 in our top 10 saltwater fish that are ideal for an established reef tank, we got the springery dottyback. Now, this is a fish that I would not typically recommend in a fish wish list stocking plan scenario like in the beginning. This is definitely a fish that is more of an ideal candidate for on the back end, where you are trying to add a little bit more flavor to your tank after it's been established for an extended period of time, because dottybacks can be rather aggressive. I have seen, not the springeries, but the neon dottybacks actually eat Astarina starfish, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if it was just like a one-off and he was just a weird fish, but he helped manage a Astarina starfish problem in a reef tank. But they are a cave dweller. They usually like a little territory, so they are going to protect their territory as well. And in a situation where you add them to a tank on the back end, it's going to be the best situation to get one of these guys in a tank. Absolute beautiful fish. Check them out, the springery dottyback. Coming in at number 4 in our top 10 saltwater fish that are ideal for an established reef tank, we have the magnificent foxface. Now, when it comes to the foxface fish in general, I would be very selective about which ones you pick. It would be, for me personally, between the bicolor, the one spot, and the magnificent. I'm probably going to go with the magnificent just because they are an absolute stunning fish. Even though that they are venomous, they are a rather docile fish, but because they are venomous, it makes them a good candidate to have a fish added onto the back end. They do have a lot of varying personalities. I've seen them be rather timid and also rather bold. They tend to be food obsessed regardless. They like their nori, so make sure that you got plenty of that on hand. But they are a beautiful addition to a reef tank, and they might even help you out with your bubble algae. But if you feed them a lot, they're probably going to hold out for the good stuff. Check them out, the magnificent foxface. Coming in at number 3, we have the yellow tang. Now, the yellow tang was one of the first tangs that was aquacultured, and definitely would recommend going with aquaculture anytime that you have the opportunity to. You might pay a little bit more with the yellow tangs because Hawaii keeps trying to shut down collection, but ultimately I'm going to go with aquaculture anytime that I can. At the beginning of the video, when I showed you that clownfish footage, that was a little biota aquaculture yellow tang there. A lot of hobbyists note the difference in coloration between the wild caughts and the aquacultured ones, but I will tell you that they will color up eventually. Just make sure you're giving them plenty of good food, nori, and they will be just as bright as the old school wild caught Hawaiian tang. Now, this is a tang I have personally added to my own systems as well as service accounts where they were one of the last fish added to the tank. Now, the zebra samba species of tangs, not just the yellow tangs, but like your purples and also the gem tangs, they are a rather aggressive species of tang. So, little story for you. I had a 120-ish gallon display system. It's an 8-foot tank. It's 2 feet wide, foot tall, and I had a half black and a tamini. When I bought the system, because this was part of a breakdown, it had a whitetail. The whitetail didn't make the changeover from moving it from their house to the store, which was during the winter months, unfortunately. But eventually wanted to add a third tank back to the mix, and I had the opportunity to get a yellow tang in there. And to my surprise, because I thought the half black was the boss, the tamini actually was the boss of the tank, and it got to a point where I thought I was going to have to pull the yellow tang, but because the yellow tang has enough of attitude, he was able to basically stick up for himself, and eventually the tamini started to lay off him a little bit, and now they couldn't be better friends. But that initial couple of days was pretty rough. I probably should have used an acclimation box just to introduce them visibly, but ultimately they worked it out and were fine from there out. And that's why I think the yellow tang is a good fish to add towards the back end of a stocking plan, but also in an established reef tank down the road. They can work well with that just the same. Coming in at number 2 in our top 10 saltwater fish that are ideal for an established reef tank, we have the blue dot jawfish. This is a personal favorite, even though that they do creep me out a little bit because there's not many fish that look at you straight on, and they will look at you. It's rather interesting. They are a relatively skittish yet bold fish, especially once they get established. In a aquarium that is established, they're typically going to kind of fall under the radar. They're going to go find a cave and just set up, show up. One thing that is incredibly important to note with this fish is they are incredibly active jumpers. So you want to make sure that you have a lid on it and even maybe something to cover up the overflow, because they do end up in the overflow quite a bit, even if you do have a lid on the tank. So with that being said, they are a beautiful addition. They will stick up for themselves, and they are an interesting fish in general. Check them out, the blue dot jawfish. And coming in at the number 1 spot on our top 10 saltwater fish that are ideal for a established reef tank, we have the flame angel. And I'm going to say with caution, because not only are they a fish that potentially could nip at corals, they also seem to have a broad range of personality, being from something that is relatively timid to a fish that is rather bold. This is definitely a fish that you don't want to add to a tank that is 75-ish gallons or less. They are definitely a fish that requires a little bit more space, and they are relatively hard to quarantine. This fish, if I was going to be quarantining it, I would do the tank transfer method. Essentially what you're doing is you're changing it from tank to tank every 3 days, or doing 100% water change, because ultimately they don't handle medication very well. Outside of that, the other concern would be whether or not they're going to be chewing on your corals. So it's a fish that you want to basically put in a stunt tank first to see if they're going to behave themselves. And then if they do behave themselves, add them to the tank. That's not to say that down the road they might change their behavior and start chewing on stuff. But generally, if you keep them well fed, you're going to be fine. Hey, if you want to learn more about reef tanks, check this video out. I will see you over there.